Cheers, pals. Alright, so I just saw Socks, aka Socks. Let me tell you, let's talk about it. I'm gonna grind up some flour here, don't mind me, and tell you about this movie because it actually wasn't that bad. It was actually one of the better horror films that I've seen in theaters. Oh god, this is going back. Nothing has really caught my eye, but this one just looked different. You know, you could tell from the ads, it felt like it was somewhat guided towards people who appreciated the first two. I mean, it's, this is a spoiler free review, but it will have slight information about the film that you will see in trailers. So just so you know, if you're trying to go into it completely blind, turn this off. So it takes place essentially from, I'm pretty sure, between the first and second film, if I'm not mistaken. And so yes, John Kramer is still alive, the original Jigsaw killer. The visuals are just less bleak and less, I don't know, cold and dirty. There's just this really grimy texture to the later Saw films, especially, like, to be honest, I stopped watching the Saw films after, I think the last one I saw was 4, and I haven't seen any since then. And this one drew me to the theater, just because it didn't seem quite as dreary and just bleak and miserable. You know, the Saw franchise is pretty well known for helping start the torture porn franchise, our torture porn genre, if you will, which are subgenre, which Hostel really took to the next level, and then all the Saw films. At some point, it felt like in that late, like, yeah, it was like maybe like the late aughts, and then going into the like early 2010s period. It just felt like these films were out trying to outdo each other and how gory they could be. And listen, I'm a sucker for gore. That doesn't bother me, but I don't really like to watch senseless suffering. I am the first one to love a revenge film. And if we're talking like movies like Tamara and stuff like that where people are suffering, but you're kind of like, well, okay, I'm all here for it. But I just can't do the nonsensical suffering. And I know Saw kind of has this thing where there's this moral, ethical aspect to it where these people are not innocent, but then who it really is, right? Which is kind of the question that gets asked later on in the series, I believe. In the first films, these people have not only committed crimes, but have wronged people. And this guy, John, seems to think that these people don't necessarily belong in society unless they change. And that's why he puts them in these traps and kind of forces them to appreciate life more and to not commit these same atrocities that they commit on a regular basis. I can do that, but when it just gets down, at least in the first couple films too, the traps were not so. There was a tension to them, a suspense to them, where you were like, God, this person, they certainly have to suffer, and that's gonna suck. It's part of the horror, right? But I'm really rooting for them to kind of get out and to live, and a couple people do live, not many, but they always are left with this trauma, right, of what they go through. And that's kind of what I was more here for. I was like, I want to see these people go through something horrifying and scary, but I don't need it to be like pig guts being, it was, it just reached a point where it was like, all right, how far can we take it? It lost its clever kind of creative. I mean, the first one really had some clever traps. I think it gets forgotten about because of how bloody and gory the franchise becomes. But the first couple films really have some unique, especially the second film with the number aspect and the, relying on each other kind of thing. I wouldn't say this had as much of that, but it was certainly seemed like it was trying to return to that kind of form, which I appreciated, and I can kind of tell from the trailers and the marketing that I saw. I heard that from a couple of reviews. Shout out to Killjoy Jake. He does great horror reviews. You should totally check him out. I realized kind of that this wasn't going to be one of those, and they had changed the marketing for a while, to be honest. Jigsaw had different marketing. I forget what the one before that, or Spiral had different marketing, sorry. And I think even Jigsaw had like somewhat different, but none of them were enough to draw me out. This, however, was just because it seemed like it simplified things and kind of brought things down to like one moment, which is kind of how the first couple films are too. And you were really rooting for, okay, so we get into our first issue. So part of my thing was This is a spoiler again for those of you who don't want to know anything about the film and you want to go in completely blind and you didn't listen to my first warning. This is your second. They in the marketing they do spoil the fact that this is fake, that he is being like defrauded, and that these people are conning, tricking John Kramer into giving them money to save his life, which they're not going to do, right? That spoiler I kind of wish wasn't actually spoiled, and I'm seeing that I'm not the only one who feels that way. It would be hard not to, I suppose. I don't know. I think they could have. I think this is just a running trend where trailers just show way too much, and that would have been one more thing to catch us off guard. And there are a couple twists in this film. I will give it that. There are a couple things that even I was like, oh, okay, I didn't see that coming, and that's kind of what kept me watching. It's I really wasn't sure what was gonna happen next. Even with these people in the traps, even with the kind of twisty nature of the film. Before I even get into any of the traps, I will just say that this film takes a different approach to the whole storytelling that I haven't seen in any other Saw film regarding there's this power dynamic that is just a classic storytelling trope, right? Like you always want the power dynamic to be changing, and this film does a pretty good job of that. I think I just spoiled probably a little bit there. Sorry. It was enough to keep me really on the edge of my seat. It was suspenseful. I was waiting to see what was going to happen next. I was curious, and I had to know. I had to know how this was going to turn out. I wasn't sure for a second there what was going to happen to these people, including some of the people that we've seen many times in this franchise. I still was not sure. That having been said, the traps were pretty cool. I will give it that. They were not too. They were my kind of traps in the sense that they weren't. Never mind. They were just cool. They were all right. I don't want to say too much more. I think some of they were effective. To be honest, the horror was effective. I do this thing. I was sitting back in my seat and I was just like clicking my nose over and over again, and I could just feel myself like being, my tension rise. The tension rising. You could really feel the tension in the theater. And that was something that was one of the reasons why I went to see it in theater and didn't wait to see it on streaming, is that I wanted to feel that tension around others in this big space with the big sound. But yeah, the traps were great. It even does this kind of unique thing where it just plays with the storytelling in a way that, again, I have not seen the most recent Saw film, so I'm sure, I believe that they changed it up a little bit, but this one just laid out this story in this way that you could follow. And even though it was slower in the first half, not boring, but it was slower in the first half. It's more dramatic tension rather than horror tension. This guy's on the brink of death. He's trying to save himself. I will say that it's kind of almost like this, what they call, or what I think John Carpenter, if I'm not mistaken, said he wanted Halloween to be like more of a Jack in the Box, or it might have been someone else that worked on Halloween. I'll have to double check, but somebody that worked on Halloween said that they wanted the original 1978 Halloween, said that they wanted it to be more like, or operate kind of like a Jack in the Box, right? And so that's kind of how this film felt, in that even though the beginning wasn't slow, it was slower than the second half, and so it really kind of amped you up for, you knew what to expect as a fan, but you were also invested in the story and invested in how we got to. That's kind of the best part about suspense, right? Is that you know what's going to happen, but you're just not sure how it's going to happen, and you're not exactly sure when it's going to happen. And so that's the two things that this film did right, is that you were waiting to see how he was going to create this scenario for these people, and how he would and react to his own real life occurrences, and when it was going to happen, and when these people were going to get out of this or not, and how they would. I will say it was pretty tense the whole way through, especially with that second and third act. The third act really changes things up. That was where I was like, okay, how are we going to end this? And as soon as I thought it was going to be over, it kind of twisted things and was like, okay, now we have a new thing going on here. I commend it for that. It was pretty unique. Again, like I said, now that I think about it, the most recent horror films that I've seen in theaters are the Scream films. I'm a huge Scream fan. I love 1 and 2, 3 I love 4. I can appreciate 3, excuse me. I love 4, and 5 and 6 I really just have very little interest in, if I'm being completely honest. I think that's why this felt like, 6 was fun to watch in theaters. I think 5 was rather slow. pretty much throughout and predictable. 6 at least kind of kept you on your toes a little bit more. We're going into a scream rant here, sorry. But this was definitely the most recent, the best horror film that I've seen in theaters in a while. And I would say probably the best horror film to come out since definitely, I really liked Megan. I did not see that in films, but I loved it. I thought Megan was really well done and really fun. And I would be willing to, I would say this and that go up against each other for best horror film of the year, at least so far. But we'll see. I would love to know what you guys think. Please let me know in the comments if you like this film, if you've seen it yet, if you plan on seeing it, and what your thoughts were and or will be. It was a lot of fun, pals. Take care. Cheers. See you on the next one.